Well, my next guest here hosted a conference last month to help American companies ship those jobs overseas. It was a seminar to teach American corporate executives how to ship those jobs overseas. He says globalization will ultimately help us all, that offshore outsourcing is not to blame for the loss of jobs in this country. He's now joined by Atul Vashistha. He says it's a misconception. And welcome. And how is it a misconception?
Thanks, Lou. Lou, it's a misconception because if you look at what offshore outsourcing is doing for America, it is actually helping American companies stay competitive. It is helping them lower the cost of products and services, and actually it's improving the buying power in our nation.
How does it, I think I understand if you will, the premise of what you're saying. But when we watch, and as we document here, literally hundreds of thousands of jobs being shipped to cheap overseas labor markets, those jobs are replaced typically by salaries that are 30% lower, and there is no migration up the value chain, it's down the value chain. So how does that help America?
You know, look, there's no denying that in the short term we have a problem. And I think the industry, the government, and the companies are still not doing enough. What I can tell you is that our clients are starting to do things to combat that.
Like what?
For example, some of the things our clients are doing is they're actually putting money into retraining. We cannot be competitive in this new global economy if our workers don't continue to update their skills, even if you're a software programmer.
Let me ask you this. Engineering, software programming have unemployment rates approaching double digits in this country. What in the world are you going to train them for?
Lou, technology, as you know, is changing every year.
I do indeed.
If 4 years ago you were doing HTML or web-based programming, you need to do a lot of different things today because that technology is old now.
Right.
I mean, I did my engineering degree and my MBA. I went back to Harvard last year to educate myself again. And I think that's something we absolutely have to do.
That's boffo. But let's talk about those hundreds of thousands of jobs. People glibly talk about training. Men and women who have trained themselves in a variety of skills, who have a variety of educational pursuits and degrees. I hear people start talking about training as if that's sort of a panacea. What job should they train themselves for? We are shipping high-value jobs overseas, to India, to the Philippines, to Ireland, to Poland, to Russia, for crying out loud. What in the world are we supposed to train them to do? Now, I understand the profit motive. As a matter of fact, no one's more pro-business, pro-American free enterprise than I am. But I'm also pro-American worker. What in the world? You talk about pain. We're seeing evidence of it every day.
Yeah, but Lou, if we don't focus on R&D investment, on training, we can't just put up our borders and imagine that these jobs will stay. In fact, companies are going bankrupt because they're not taking advantage of these lower cost markets.
Because somebody else is that right?
Right, exactly. So there's, but you know.
So what you end up is a race to the bottom, as it's been styled. Because if one company is going over to India to get a job, to pay a salary that is a tenth of what they would be paying in this country, they're forced to compete. This is not free trade. This is not comparative advantage as envisioned by David Ricardo. This is the wholesale exportation of American wealth.
Right, but Lou, the difference here is that this is a global economy. We can't imagine.
I understand that. But these are all saws. Globalization has been a fact since 1987, for crying out loud.
Right, and Lou, take a look at what happened to the buying power in our country. It's significantly gone up. And I know in the last 2 years, 3 years...
Earnings in this country and consumption power in this country for the last 3 decades have declined. Over the past 3 years has actually fallen even more dramatically than that average over 3 decades. It's quite the inverse.
Lou, I'm sorry, I beg to differ.
Please.
You know, if you take a look at the buying power of our country, let's take a look at the last 2 decades. We created 22 million excess jobs that were destroyed in our country. I mean, this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics number for the last 2 decades. So, we
created 22 million jobs during the course of the Clinton administration from 1992 to 2000.
Right. And so we created surplus jobs. So what I'm talking about is, as the economy changed, we actually created more jobs than we lost. At the same time, the buying power in the country...
It's sort of evident when we say 22 million jobs.
Right. No, so what is happening today is, I think this is the next evolution in the global economy.
But that's wonderful, the great evolution. If you believe that the United States should be shipping its wealth, its jobs, its standard of living, and its quality of life to third world countries where there are no regulations for environment, no regulations for labor, no standards that is a requirement here in this country. the logical extrapolation, it seems to me, Atul, is that if we are going to compete fairly with fair trade in a globalized market, it seems to me that India, the Philippines, Mexico, a Central American nation should have the same standards, don't you? Otherwise, we're competing simply on the price of labor.
Lou, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, if you look at the service industry, which we participate in, these companies are paying higher average wages than the local counterparts. I mean, so if you look at what's happening in India or China.
You're saying American companies are paying higher wages in other countries than native companies.
Well, the American companies and the local companies that participate in this business. So companies like Infosys or Wipro, all these companies in India, they're paying better wages than the average people get in that country.
The average Indian company does.
Absolutely.
But why in the world do 10 million Americans who are unemployed in this country give a damn?
Well, Lou, here's why they give a damn. Because if we don't do this, if we don't continue to innovate and let our companies be successful, we will lose more jobs in the future.
Wait a minute. You're not innovating. You're not being more efficient. You're talking about hiring cheaper labor. Those are only code words for cheap labor. McKinsey did a study,
absolutely,
as you're aware of, and what is the bulk of the gain for American companies?
Well, it's all
labor. In labor savings.
Well, a bulk, but don't forget the other.
The bulk, as in 70% of it.
Right, Lou, but what happens to the money that comes back to our country?
What money?
The money that's being repatriated back to the country, the savings that happen for American companies.
We should ship all our jobs in, because it sounds like a highly profitable enterprise.
Lou, it's easy to take a look at that.
Atul, I understand your position. I understand the profit motive. But corporations have a stake in this country, do they not?
I absolutely agree. In fact,
and they have a stake in the community, in investing in their people. They have a responsibility because they're the beneficiary of this national American economy.
Lou, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, one of the things that has not happened yet is that the industry, the associations, and the companies have not come together to address the displaced workers. Now, I can tell you, like I was telling you before, some of our companies are doing that. Apart from training.
That's a wonderful paternal outlook. But what I would much prefer to hear business people, men and women in this country, running corporations, and folks like you trying to make a dollar. You have a responsibility to this national economy. This is not just a marketplace. It's a nation, right?
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you come back and talk some more because we're out of time here. Will you come back? We'll have more discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Atul, thank you very much. Vashistha.